hear me now? Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Yes, as she said, I am going to be speaking about how to avoid a social media marketing disaster. So in this session, we're going to talk about, first, how social media has completely changed the way we not only communicate, but the way we provide customer service. Also, how can you see a potential disaster before it's actually going to happen? I'll explain some techniques you can use to identify what could potentially be a problem for you when you're marketing online before it becomes that problem. But if there is a disaster in your social media marketing, what do you do? We'll talk about how to handle that. And then we'll talk about how to learn from that disaster once it has been resolved. So let's look at the changing customer service landscape since social media has become available. We all know that social media marketing lets you connect and interact with your customer in ways we never imagined. 20 years ago, we couldn't say that we could have a dialogue with one customer, 10 customers, 100 customers, 1,000, or even 10,000 at the same time. With social media, though, it's not just us as marketers who have so much power and ability. The power also rests in the hands of the customer. Never before have we had a customer who could speak to us directly and speak to all of their friends, their community members, people in other states or countries, all from their own personal computer or mobile device. So that individual customer has incredible power today that we used to have to write a letter when we wanted to complain to a company, and today you just post something on Facebook. So when you're marketing, we all have learned over time that social media marketing is not a broadcast channel. It's not television. It's not radio. It's not a one-way means of communication. And that's a little bit frightening for some marketers, because that means the consumer doesn't just watch or listen to what you have to say, but the consumer now talks back and then tells other people about you. So it's a dialogue. It is some broadcast, but expect that there is a response. And social media marketing also gives us that connection, but beyond the connection, it gives us a chance to engage, to interact very personally with customers in a very timely manner. In fact, it's such a timely manner that there's an expectation now that it's not going to take weeks or days for you to respond when a customer is asking something or demanding something. The customer expects you to respond immediately. This is very different from the way we used to do customer service. We never had that immediacy. Other than the phone call, we never had that demand placed on us to be vigilant about what is being said, what's happening across many communication channels, Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest, all of the different social networks, and Instagram. So suddenly we have many channels, and we have to pay attention, and we have to respond very quickly. So this demand is very intense for most companies out there. So when you're using social media, here are the basics of what you're trying to do. Instead of broadcasting, you're trying to attract attention. You really want to get a reaction from your customer or the consumer out there who you're hoping is going to be your customer. You want to encourage them to interact with you. You might ask questions and be looking for responses, but you're trying to get that connection to be more than just clicking the like button or retweeting you You want them to take a real action, an action that converts them into more of a customer. So if they're a prospect, if they're not yet your customer, you want them to take some kind of action to connect even further with you. So it could be to subscribe to receive your email. In the best world, it's to click to purchase your product, or to click to email you to hire you for your services, or to get off of their device and walk into your business establishment and do business with you. The purpose of social media marketing and all marketing is to develop that relationship and bring that customer closer to you. But as I mentioned, this takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of attention to engage with your customers using social media. And many of us feel very pressed for time. It's not always the number one priority to use social media for all of our communications. Others of us might be more comfortable with that. But it can be a challenge for companies, especially smaller companies or smaller departments within large companies that don't have all the resources. As I've mentioned before, the customer expects you to be paying attention. They expect a fast response. And like any human being, they want to be heard. And that's another piece that when you're doing social media marketing, you need to remember. On the other side of the screen, whether it be your computer screen or your mobile device screen, there are human beings there with emotions, with lives that could be very complicated or difficult. So what you hear from them is often colored by their experiences. As I mentioned also, the audience has their own audience. So your audience has their audience, and they want you to pay attention to them. When they're happy, what would you do? Well, when they're happy, the best thing you could do is compliment them, thank them. They're also very quick to compliment you when they're happy. But what if they're unhappy? What if they complain? Then what are you to do? And this is where social media gets a little tricky, because the unhappy customer is going to complain about you in public. When they say something nice, they say good news travels fast, bad news travels faster. So they'll say something nice about you, and that's great. Everybody listens. Maybe somebody else says, oh yes, I like that company as well. When they say something bad about you, that's when the problems start to happen. This is being done essentially in public. It's not only being done in public, it's remaining there as a record of a complaint. Then, if other customers are unhappy and somebody has stood up and said they have a problem with your company, now other people can join in. They can join in and also voice their complaints and turn what was initially a single person complaining into a potential social media crisis. You have no control over many of the things that are being said about you and your company outside of a few social networks where you're able to ban someone or remove them from the forum. Facebook will allow you to ban someone, but on Twitter, you have very little recourse. If someone decides to start complaining about you, you can complain to Twitter, but they may not necessarily remove those posts. So suddenly there can be a large conversation full of negativity about your company. So you need to have a plan. The most important thing that you can do when you're trying to get in front of a social media marketing disaster is planning in advance. The worst thing you could do to handle a social media marketing crisis of any kind is to start planning when it happens. when the bad thing, the negative thing has taken place, suddenly you decide to scramble to try to get that plan in place. That's not the right tactic. That's not the right strategy to handle crises. You need to have your plan today. You need to start thinking about how you're going to guard yourself against the kinds of either accidental or deliberate situations that occur both online and offline. This is part of your overall crisis communications plan that you should already have for your company. Every company needs a crisis communications plan, and every company needs to plan in advance for a social media marketing communications crisis as well. So what do you do to start planning? You need to set up ways to monitor what is being said about your company. You're looking for the good, you're looking for the bad. You probably have the tendency to put a report together of all the good things people are saying about you and all the good things that are happening around your company. If you have a boss, they probably have an expectation for a status update, and you want to reflect the positive things. And that's great because you can use tools online to listen to the positive things people are saying. But you should also use those tools to identify negative things people are saying. And here are a couple of very popular tools. Some of them are free, or they have a free level, and then they may charge a monthly or an annual fee in order to have additional features. Google Alerts, for example, is free, and it does a very wide and broad look at keywords that are being said online. That could be your company name, your product name, or any other keyword that can help you identify a conversation that could relate to you and your company. Hootsuite is another good way to monitor what is happening online, as is TalkWalker and Social Mention. Most of these are very affordable. There are also enterprise-level listening and monitoring software, and they call these social media marketing dashboards. Now, I mentioned the positive and the negative. But when you're listening and monitoring what's happening online, the conversations and what people are saying, there's also neutral. And most of what people say online, most of the things they say fall into the neutral category. There's also something that sounds like it could be negative, but it actually is positive. And the reverse is something that could be positive, or you think it's positive, may be negative, such as if somebody were to say, oh, that company is so great, they never even pick up their phone. So when you're searching, you may find they're so great without reading the second part of what they say. So you need to really pay attention to what kinds of things are being said and the tone of what's being said. And that's often the key to stopping a disaster before it happens in social media marketing. It's when you listen to the tone and you consider what's actually being said, as opposed to reacting to a misunderstanding. So let's take a look at just a few things that are being said out there about some companies and how you could possibly react. So here is an actual donut shop called Krispy Kreme, extremely popular here in the United States. And here's a comment from someone. I think you guys are the best, so I decided to make you this, and it's a drawing of a donut. And then the company, Krispy Kreme, commented, love this, thank you. When you get a positive comment, it should not go ignored. When somebody takes time to say something positive about your company, take the time and have a process in place to simply thank them. You don't have to go overboard. You don't have to try to sell them on anything more. That simple human kindness of saying thank you goes a long way. And when it comes to larger companies, many people are very excited to hear personally from these companies. Even smaller companies, when they respond, people are impressed. And so simply saying thank you does not take up a lot of time, and it makes a powerful and positive impact. Now, if somebody is saying something neutral, and so many things are very neutral, if somebody is using an app to check into your place, and the message simply says, I've checked into this restaurant, that's neutral. They haven't said they loved it. They haven't said they've hated it. So it's up to you to determine an appropriate way to get in touch with them, to respond to them in a way that doesn't seem strange or invasive. So Target, a popular large store that sells all sorts of things and is beloved by many people, it's a great place to shop, but here's a conversation where they're not saying it's a great place to shop. They're saying, someone take me out to Target, and a friend says, I've got you, I'll take you. Well, when do you want to go to Target? And somebody says, I can go today. So that's just a conversation. Nobody's saying Target is the best store in the world, and nobody is saying anything extremely positive, but it's an opportunity, potentially, to say something to get into that conversation. And Target decided to say something to somebody who was talking about taking their friend to Target and said, now that's a true friend. See you soon. This comment, I would consider to be a very human comment. There's something called human marketing, which is truly just the technique of being human, not being mechanical, not being formulaic, not being too scripted, and to actually have a conversation. So because Target feels comfortable and has set the trend of having conversations with their customers, this is a conversational response to what is otherwise a very neutral mention of their store. Now, there's the negative comments. This is harder to deal with because we're human as well. As marketers, as business owners, we're human, and what people say to us and about us can be very disconcerting, especially when it's negative, especially if it's not true, or if it is true and we haven't done anything about it. So here is a negative comment to a company called MailChimp that offers email marketing solutions. 2 weeks and still no response from MailChimp support. This is like Sears-level customer service. See, they're insulting another company called Sears. Last chance to tell me how to resolve. Clearly, this person is angry, frustrated. Their emotions are high, and they've taken it to the internet to complain. MailChimp, and now MailChimp as a company, their tone is known for their humor. But they also know when to be humorous and when not to be humorous. You need to take a light approach, but not necessarily a humorous approach. And their decision was to say, do you happen to have a ticket number we could reference? We'll be glad to check on its progress. They put in a positive word. They responded not saying, oh, I'm so sorry that we didn't do this. They got straight to the point and straight to the action that this person wants resolved. So that's a very carefully worded, but it sounds very human as well. And it takes things at the end to a positive note. There really is a lot of psychology involved when you're trying to interact with other human beings strictly online. So how do you address what could be a potential disaster? You know, the previous message was 2 weeks with no response. that could have turned into a full-blown conversation amongst people on Twitter saying, yeah, I had that problem too. Yeah, MailChimp doesn't respond. But instead, MailChimp was there and immediately trying to de-escalate the situation. So to address that potential disaster, you've got your plan in place for how you're going to respond. And this plan should really be a list of many different scenarios and many different responses. Practice, role play, as they say. Pretend to be that unhappy customer and think of all the complaints you've heard over the years of running your business. How would you respond? If you were that customer having that problem, how would you want another company to respond? After you've had your preparedness, you want to then respond in a relatively neutral fashion. Most people who post their complaints to social networks just want to be heard. They want your comments. They want to see that you're paying attention. They want your acknowledgement. So that kind, that respectful, and that prompt acknowledgement could actually diffuse a situation before it became too disruptive. And by acknowledgement, sometimes you may need more time to formulate a good response. So simply saying, we hear you and we're working on this issue is a great way to let them know, okay, I've been heard, and that's a start. And now what next? Your best thing is to try to take the conversation offline as soon as you make contact. The quicker that you're able to get on the phone with the person and directly speak, or even direct message in private, or in email directly and privately, the better it will be all around. That also helps diffuse the overall situation. What the public sees is a complaint, an acknowledgement that was kind and respectful, and then a request to be in contact for further assistance. That looks good. What you don't want them to see is continued attacks from the person who's complaining because you've kept the dialogue in public. So as much as you can bring offline, you'd like to bring offline. Once you have that private and direct contact with the person, you want to find out more about their issue. You need to be prepared to have a remedy. So for example, I'll use Krispy Kreme, the donut company. If somebody says, my donut was supposed to be hot and it was cold, what next? Do you invite them back and assure them their next donut will be hot, fresh from the oven? That's probably a good move, but how many free donuts are you going to give away? You need a plan to understand how serious is the complaint, how legitimate is the complaint, is it something you can solve? And if it's something you can solve, what is fair and what is not going to bankrupt your company by trying to resolve people's issues? If it's a real legitimate problem, it must be resolved. But if somebody is complaining, clearly there is a problem, and it might not be that hot donut was cold. It may have been, I had a terrible day, and I was looking forward to that hot donut. And so now you are the victim of their terrible day. So maybe it's not necessarily a free donut, and maybe it's just simply a coupon for a donut or a discount of a dozen donuts in the future. This sounds very simplistic, but if you think about it, if you spend more time winning over and retaining your customers, you're spending less money on trying to gain that new customer, which is a much more expensive thing. If you win over that new customer, they will say good things about you to their friends in public and help you market. So there is a reason for doing this other than the simple reason of being a good business and being good to your customers. Let's take a restaurant example. If somebody were to complain about their meal, what would you offer them? If you were physically there at the restaurant, what would you do for them? You might take the meal off of their ticket. You might offer them a free dessert and cup of coffee. You might offer them a gift card to come back and try again and say that you'll do better. But if they complain about you after they've left, what do? You can't take anything off their bill. They've already paid. But you could offer them a gift card. You could offer them a discount for a future meal. You can invite them back. You could say, ask for the manager, and we'll make sure that you're well taken care of the next time you visit. That's what social media marketing can do to turn around a complaint and bring somebody back through the doors so you can do better. If you're a clothing store, and what if the person purchased an item and it fell apart the first time they washed it? That may not be your fault. You're selling somebody else's product. But what will you do? Will you invite them back to the store and give them a full refund? Or would you offer them a discount on their next purchase? You need to decide what your remedy is and what is fair and what your store can afford. What if you're a hotel and somebody has had terrible customer service and they go online and they're complaining about the terrible attitude, the rude person behind the front desk? Again, you could be there with a kind and respectful acknowledgement. You could try to bring it offline, and you could offer them something for their troubles. What would that be? Some of the companies that are very, very good at fast response, paying attention, responding in a way that is appropriate, respectful, and always looking for that remedy are airlines. So let's take a look at some of the commercial airlines that are handling customer service in social media very well. So there's Alaska Airlines. And here is just showing you what they're saying to other people. You're not even seeing what was being said, but you can tell that they're paying attention and they care. Awesome, glad it worked out. We'll see you soon. Then they always put dash and the name of the customer service person who is helping, the person at the company. So it says dash Ryan. Then Ryan says to somebody else, sorry about that, Chris. What flight are you on today? If we're not stocking properly, we'll follow up with our team. And then somebody else said something, Lauren said something, and Alaska Airlines said, darn, you can either work with our airport team to rebook or reach out to our reservations desk, and here's the number. There's a friendly tone, a personal tone. There is an immediate response to thank someone, but there's also the immediate response to help someone. Then there's KLM. If you look, each one of these airlines has their own tone. We're 24/7 if you need us. Thank you for those kind words. We do our best to help out each and every passenger we have. Hello, we responded to your query via direct message. Please check. And then here's JetBlue. Sorry you're having trouble booking. Please give us a call if the problem persists. You should be able to check in online. Are you seeing a specific error? We look forward to seeing you. Glad it worked out. How exciting. This is human conversation happening. They're addressing customer service and social media marketing in a way that they're connecting with their customers, addressing their issues, and being friendly. So what you're trying to go for is that turnaround. When you listen and when you respond to someone who's complaining, you turn them around from being unhappy to being happy. That's the hope. It doesn't always work, but that is the purpose of using social media marketing, not just for marketing itself, but for customer service. Once they turn around and you've done something for them and they're now that happier customer, they're going to be a vocal supporter of your company. They'll praise you in social media. They'll boost your positive reputation because you handled their situation with care and respect. So as I mentioned before, it is much less expensive to keep that loyal customer than it is trying to win new ones. So acquiring that new customer is even more expensive if you've got a bad reputation online. So what if it's not just something small? What if it's a bigger potential disaster? Some complaints can be a lot bigger, and they require a lot more advanced planning and a lot more care when you're trying to handle them. So what is that big disaster? And is it even in your control? How big is that fire? And how are you going to handle it? Are you going to use a glass of water to put out that fire? Or a bucket of water? Or do you need something bigger and stronger? There isn't a single right answer for any company. How you respond to a serious complaint or a much more serious issue or situation, it sometimes may require consulting a lawyer. By doing your scenarios in advance, by planning with your team for responding to a potential crisis, and by talking to your lawyer in advance to make sure your responses are appropriate and okay legally, all of that sets you up to handle these crises or these potential crises in a much better fashion. So what if your company makes a mistake? What if your company really is at fault? We talked a little bit about issues that come up when a customer is having a bad day. And maybe it really wasn't your fault, or maybe it was a small thing. But sometimes your company does something wrong, or the product is faulty, or the customer service is terrible, or maybe even something worse. So a simple example of being at fault in social media. You may have heard or read about some social media embarrassments that have taken place. If you do a Google search later for social media marketing fail, you'll probably find a lot of these. And this is when somebody posts from a company account and says something inappropriate. In some cases, it's simply a person who's managing social media accidentally posts to the company account when they meant to post to their personal account. And a lot of embarrassment can happen after that. So what's the best course of action when it really is your fault? When it's something embarrassing, you might as well own up to it. Again, human interaction. A sincere apology that comes quickly can help diffuse that situation. Admitting it was your fault. We're sorry. We used the wrong account. That was entirely inappropriate. It will not happen again. That is okay to admit. But sometimes when the mistake is bigger and much more serious, and this is part of your regular crisis communications, you have to be careful about saying you are at fault. There are these bigger situations that need a more structured path to resolution. So when you're trying to handle these situations, again, speak to a lawyer, but chances are they'll say, don't say, oh yes, that's our fault. That's our fault that the product blew up in your hands or burned your skin. That's our fault that your curling iron burned your skin. That's just not what you want to say. Yes, that product burned their skin. It could have been them using it incorrectly, but it was your product and it did cause a burn. That is something that you need to be careful about how you approach. Silence is not the right approach. If you see a complaint, I burned my skin with this curling iron. I cannot believe this company and their terrible product. That's not the moment for you to back off and decide to say nothing. That is time for you to go into this other more serious mode. So with this serious mode, you need to think carefully before you begin responding. Remember, people are listening. People are watching how you handle the situation. You need a plan to make sure your company is monitoring and ready to step in. So, in these more serious situations, who is going to be your first responder? Who will be that person, that first person to have contact with that customer who has brought to your attention a very serious issue? It's not always your social media marketer. They need to bring that to somebody else's attention. So who else in the organization should be notified when something seems very serious or potentially serious? It's not usually the public relations person. It needs to be somebody at a management level, somebody with a little bit more experience handling potential crises at a larger level. Who is the decision maker? Because often when something is very serious and very complex, somebody needs to make some quick decisions and have the power to be able to make those decisions. How are you going to assess how serious this is and how much you need to escalate the situation internally? And then what is your remedy going to be? And how quickly can you get to that remedy? When a situation is very large, say that your company created a disaster and polluted fresh water that people were supposed to be drinking in the community. That is a very, very large crisis. That is a crisis that takes a long time to remedy. But there are steps that you can take immediately to diffuse that situation and to work more quickly toward resolution. The last piece of it is after you've started to resolve these situations, or after those situations are resolved, you need to regroup as a company with your team and recap what's happened, what's been done. And the recap could be happening during the resolution as well. But think about this. This is a lot of steps, and this involves a lot of people, but it cannot take a lot of time. So, how do you learn from something after you've gone through that process? Here are some of the steps to begin learning from what has happened, what has transpired, from the smallest of issues to the largest of disasters. You need to be tracking the comments and the complaints, even the small ones. Track them and keep track of your responses to them. Use this information for two things. You can use it as an internal document so that anyone handling these situations has a reference point that donut was cold. How did they handle it last time? And you set a precedence for the kind of remedy that your company will take. It'll save you time as you make those decisions. Again, when the bigger disasters, it's going to take more time. You could develop a frequently asked questions document and publish it on your website, put it onto Facebook, link to it from your social networks, and that can help answer questions for people before they become issues. So this is a great way of tracking, seeing the progress, and then having some precedents so you can more quickly assess and remedy situations. So the idea is that you want to resolve the issues. You want to improve your company. So think back to the restaurant example. If you get a lot of complaints about the service being unfriendly, the customer may have had a bad day, or they may be pointing you to a real problem with your company. So you resolve it with the customer first, but then you need to examine this issue with your staff. Perhaps your staff needs more training. Maybe they need to learn better customer service in person, or perhaps they need better training in customer service online. It doesn't always come naturally, so customer service is a learned skill. That can help improve your company, and these complaints should lessen. If you're tracking your complaints, and if most of the complaints say the customer service is terrible, you train your staff, start to look at the tracking of comments and complaints. Are there less complaints about the bad service? These are the ways that you improve your company, by tracking and remedying both externally and internally as well. So social media can take a restaurant complaint and turn this restaurant from one that has a problem to one that is praised online. It's a valuable tool for your company if you manage it well and you have a plan in place. So not all situations can be predicted, but with experience and handling each situation, you begin to have a process, not just a plan. So to sum it up, here are some of your steps. Plan, have that plan in advance, and revisit your plan regularly, particularly if that plan didn't work well. Your plan is not foolproof. There may be problems after that you did not anticipate, so revise your plan accordingly. Listen, you need to monitor what's being said, pay attention, and have people work on shifts. It's very hard to monitor 24/7. You should set up alerts that can alert you when there is too much negative comments happening, too many of them happening. You could have alerts that could actually go to a mobile device or trigger some kind of alarm of some kind that gets your attention. But ultimately, you need a plan even when everyone's asleep, because somebody somewhere is awake and complaining. You need to assess the situation quickly and determine what their tone is and what their meaning is. You need to acknowledge people quickly and let them know that you're paying attention and that you care and that you're going to take care of things. But try to take it offline quickly. Again, it's all about being very fast here, because social media moves at lightning speed. How are you going to respond to them? What remedy are you going to make? And how are you going to recap that situation? Ultimately, we are human beings trying to communicate about our company, our product, our service. And we're trying to communicate with human beings on the other end of a screen who have many things going on in their lives. It's not complicated to start with a little bit of human kindness. Using respect, kindness, and caring in your social media marketing, in your communications, can go a very long way to avoiding a disaster. It's not foolproof. Not everything is predictable. Not every plan will work. But if you're paying attention and if you are working toward improvement, constantly working toward improvement, social media marketing and using it for customer service can truly help your company. So that's a lot of information here, a lot of things going on that, depending on your company, might be relevant, or it might not quite suit your company. So I know that we're going to open it up to questions now, and I'm happy to answer any of those questions. It could be specifically about your company or about another company that you've seen or a situation that you've seen online. I hope you'll take this time now to allow me to give you additional information. Let's see. I'm looking to see if we have any questions coming in. I believe you can enter the questions into the question box.
Yes, thank you very much for such an intriguing presentation. Folks, we are now open for the question and answer session. If you have any question, you can either put in the question box given in the end of the webinar console, or you could equally raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon available on the webinar console. So let me start. go straight to the question box. We have a question for you, Aliza. That is, how should companies measure their social media marketing success?
How should they measure their social media marketing success? Well, I think we all tend to get very caught up in numbers. And often when you're creating a report about the success of your social media marketing, you tend to lean strictly toward the numbers. How many likes you received, how many comments you received that were positive, how many shares you received. Then you look at the more concrete business numbers, how many sales you had, or how many inquiries, how many people visited your website. We tend to look at numbers, but what I think you also want to look at, particularly when it comes to social media marketing for customer service, are the conversions. How many conversions have you had, and what are the quality of those conversions? And by that I mean, how many unhappy customers or complaints have you had that you've turned around to be happy customers, and then what were the results of that? How many positive things did they say to how many people? And how you were able to improve your company internally, a process, a system, a product, because of that. So I think it's easy to get caught in a trap of just listing numbers without looking at the broader picture of the results. And success is different for every company, but ultimately the bottom line is the bottom line, meaning you have a company because you want to sell a product or you want to sell a service. And so sales are your ultimate goal. But because social media marketing is not a direct sales tool, it's the strengthening of the relationships and the strengthening of your brand to get closer to the sale. That should be the success you're measuring. How close are you getting to that sale? How has social media marketing helped you get to that sale or that repeat sale, but strengthened the relationship with that customer? I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Aliza, for such a great answer. Hope it helps for the attendees. We have another one, that is how to make sure your business is doing social right.
How do you make sure your business is doing social media marketing right? Well, if you have good results, that's a sure sign that you're doing something right. But I think social media marketing is not your normal way of communication. Now, maybe the younger generation who has grown up using mobile devices, text messaging, social networks, for them, communicating in that manner might be second nature. For many of us, particularly in my generation, it's a learned skill. But even that younger person who is very good at Twitter or very good at Snapchat or Facebook doesn't necessarily know how to properly use those tools for social media marketing. So first and foremost, I would suggest training and planning and setting forth your goals and knowing clearly what you want the outcomes to be, and make sure your outcomes are aligned with what social media marketing can do. If your goal is simply sales, you've missed the full point of social media marketing. So you can tell if you're doing well if you are incrementally moving closer to that sale. You can tell if you're doing well if responses are more positive. And you can tell if you're doing well if you've turned the negatives into more positive. So it's hard to measure without knowing what your idea of success is, and it's hard to know if you're doing it well unless you already have a standard. And training could help you identify and reach that standard. And so that's one good way of figuring out if you're doing it well.
We have another one, Aliza, that is, what are some common social media marketing mistakes a business make?
So common mistakes that business make with social media marketing. Well, the first common one is to ignore what's being said, either deliberate silence or not paying attention because you don't have the right tools set up. Ignoring is the absolute worst mistake you can make because the conversation is going on without you and it goes on anyway. No amount of ignoring it is going to make it better. So that's an extremely common mistake. Another one is something I said early on, is just simply broadcasting. Simply posting without ever responding, without ever engaging in conversation, without ever reaching out. It's very mechanical. It's lacking in a human touch. And there are very few situations where that is okay. If you're going to broadcast, you should be a TV station or a radio station. But even TV stations and radio stations realize they cannot simply broadcast. They need to be responsive to a certain level. So those are two, ignoring or just simply broadcasting. And I think the third one would just be underestimating the power of the customer to actually take down your company in either reputation or even ruin your business because of the power that the customer has. Your reputation is that first impression people will get about your company. And if your reputation is terrible, then you have to spend a lot of money to try to fix that. If you maintain a good reputation, then you are spending less money on reputation management and you can spend more money on growing your business. Any other questions?
Yes, we have another one and seems to be interesting. Is social media marketing a job that anyone can do, or it really needs a previous experience for doing this job well?
So social media marketing, anybody who is good at communications in general has a foundation for being able to do well with social media marketing. Is it for everyone? No. Should everyone do it? Not necessarily. However, it is an important skill for everyone within your company, from the CEO down to the secretary, to learn at least the basic skills. Because if you think about it, almost all of your employees are probably using it personally already. And in a sense, what they're doing in social media can be affecting your company's reputation if people know they work for your company. So setting some guidelines, even having a handbook for your staff with the rules of how to engage in social media is so important. So as a business owner or as a manager, you just want to make sure all your staff is trained. You can have a plan where you allow everybody within the company to have some access to social media on behalf of your company, but only if they're well trained. Can anybody do it? Ultimately, you want a certain amount of control, but understanding you will not have full control. People can be trained well, but not everyone will be good at it. In any one company, sometimes the unexpected person, maybe the receptionist who is so used to customer service on the phone, is terrible at social media marketing. But maybe the manager, who usually is not very good in person, is fantastic in social media marketing. There are courses you can take, there are books you can read, and there are a lot of ways to gain those skills. You need to make a decision as a business owner or as a manager or as an employee how involved you can get and how much you want to be involved in that. But imagine, customer service is not necessarily public relations or marketing. Your customer service people should be trained. So it's a little bit of a broad answer to a question, but I hope that answered the question as well.
Hope the answer helped the audience. Thank you very much, Aliza. Before we end the webinar, do you have any concluding remarks?
Yes, I think I just want to say that It sometimes is intimidating to think of all the responses people can have in social media, all the comments and all the complaints. Don't look at the complaints as the burden. I think a lot of companies are afraid to go online because they're afraid of that negativity, but look at that negativity as opportunity to turn someone around, to learn more about your company and the customer experience, and to improve your company so that other customers are happy. So even if you can't turn someone around because they're just simply not going to be willing to be turned around, you've made your best effort, and people see that you made your best effort, and that counts for something. So don't be intimidated or turned off by social media because there is sometimes that negativity. Look at it as opportunity. Thank you.
I really want to thank you, Aliza, on behalf of Gulf Business Network Training Center for sharing this valuable information. Thank you all of those who participated in this webinar, and thank you, Aliza, for being an early bird with us. We are recording this webinar, so stay tuned to www.gbndc.com/webinars to access the recorded version of webinar or to download the soft copy presentation. You can also check out our upcoming programs and webinars on our website. With this, I would be dismissing you all from this webinar. Allah Hafiz. Bye-bye.